Every palace weapon went dark at the same instant. The queen ordered the nursery evacuated. Vale stepped through the only open doorway, turned the manual wheel from the wrong side, and sealed herself in with the assassins. I watched the door close between her and the nursery wing. Then I heard the first impact from the other side. "Open it," I ordered. Mara's voice came through the old emergency intercom. "Give me 1 minute." My throat fans tightened. In the Namurai security tradition, that response meant either courage or insanity. I had spent 22 years adjudicating palace threats. I knew the difference. Courage protected the sovereign. Insanity stood in a doorway and asked the palace to wait. "My name is Kaelvorn, Senior Security Adjudicator of the House of Asha. The palace weapons belong to us. The corridor seals belong to us. The nursery belonged to the queen. Vale belonged nowhere inside the security perimeter. She was a civilian emergency architect, hired to inspect evacuation routes after a minor pressure fault in the Western Wing. She carried no weapon. Her contract listed 3 tools, 1 tablet, and a folded paper map of the old palace. At 1842, every weapon in the palace lost power. Not discharged, not disabled individually. They went dark together. The guards' rifles became warm metal in their hands. The ceiling turrets folded into their housings. The defense drones dropped out of the air. At 1843, the palace crown detected 12 unauthorized life signatures inside the Eastern Security Corridor. At 1844, Queen Asha ordered the nursery evacuated. At 1844 and 9 seconds, Vale closed the door. "Open it," I repeated. "Not yet. Those are assassins." "Yes. You are unarmed." "I know." "Then you're not protecting anyone." Another impact shook the intercom. Mara breathed once, slowly. "I'm protecting the door." Behind me, Queen Asha stood beneath the dim glow of her crown. The Namurai crown was not metal. It was a living sensory array, a fan of translucent plates that read pressure, heat, and movement through the palace walls. The plates around her head fluttered. "Adjudicator," she said, "can the door hold? Against 12 intruders?" "For perhaps 20 seconds." "Then open it." Mara answered before I could. "Your Majesty, if you open this door, the nursery loses its only independent seal." The queen looked toward the sealed corridor. "How do you know that?" "Because your palace was built by people who expected the security system to fail." Commander Terrell Sorn stepped beside me. He was the palace security chief, a veteran of 3 succession crises, and a firm believer in lethal certainty. "The human is delaying an armed response," he said. "Authorize the emergency purge." The emergency purge would flood the corridor with paralytic gas. It would also enter the nursery ventilation system in 40 seconds. I checked the routes. The palace weapons were offline, but the purge system remained available. "Sorn," I said, "the nursery ventilation is connected to the eastern spine. Then seal the nursery and purge the corridor." "The nursery seal is manual." Mara's voice came through the intercom. "That is why I'm on the wrong side of it." The first impact became a second. The door flexed inward. Mara had closed the old nursery Ring 7 seal, a barrier designed to protect children during power loss. It was not a military door. It had no weapon ports, no targeting system, and no remote release. It had 1 manual wheel on each side. Mara had turned hers from the corridor side. She had sealed herself in with the people trying to get through. "Open it," Sorn said. "No, Olivia." His head turned toward me. "You are allowing a civilian to determine palace security. I am determining whether your solution kills the nursery." The crown's plates fluttered faster. Queen Asha raised one hand. "Both of you." "Explain." Mara did. "The assassins have spoofed the palace weapons, but they can't spoof the old seal. The door is independent. If I keep them here, the nursery remains outside their network." "And what are you doing inside?" the queen asked. "Buying time." "With what?" Mara looked at the corridor camera. I could see her through the dim feed. She had removed her jacket and wrapped it around one arm. The other hand held a folding metal ruler. "Architecture," she said. The door shook again. A thin line appeared along its edge. One of the assassins had a cutting tool. Sorn reached for the manual purge control. "And this," he said. Mara heard him. Do not use the gas. You are in no position to issue orders. I'm in the only position where the gas kills me first. That is not a reason to preserve the attackers. No, it's a reason to preserve the children. She stepped away from the door. The corridor camera caught the movement. Mara was not facing the attackers. She was studying the walls. The palace had been renovated 3 times. The current security map showed a straight passage from the door to the service lift. The old paper map in Mara's hand showed a second route, hidden behind the nursery's pressure control wall. She unfolded it on the floor. Adjudicator, she said. How old is the Eastern Palace Foundation? 406 years. Then your current map is wrong. Soren gave a hard laugh. The palace has complete structural scans. Your scans show what was installed. They don't show what was left behind. Mara placed her palm against the wall. Then she tapped it twice. The sound was almost too soft for the camera microphone. She tapped again farther down the corridor. A hollow answer returned. There's a service cavity, she said. The cutting tool struck the door. Mara moved to the wall and pried at a seam with the metal ruler. The panel opened by 2 centimeters. Behind it was an old maintenance shaft. It ran parallel to the nursery. It also ran directly beneath the palace crown's emergency sensor array. Soren understood first. If she opens that shaft, the assassins can bypass the door. Mara shook her head. No, I can collapse it. On yourself. On the attackers. That is a lethal action. It is a structural action. Mara pulled a second panel free. Inside the cavity, ancient pressure braces moved beneath the floor. The shaft was part of the palace's original disaster system. If the braces were released, the corridor would fold inward and seal itself. It would also crush anyone standing in the shaft. Mara had found the fastest solution. The assassin struck the door again. The wheel jumped beneath her wrapped arm. She stumbled. I saw blood appear along her sleeve. Use the braces, Soren ordered. Mara looked at the release lever. Then she looked at the nursery camera. No, Soren's throat clicked. You are refusing a clean, tactical solution. I'm refusing a solution that kills people before we know who they are. They entered the Queen's palace with weapons. Then they could be stopped without being buried alive. The door began to open. The first assassin forced one arm through the gap. His armor was dark and seamless. A weapon was mounted beneath his wrist. Mara stepped between him and the nursery wall. She did not strike him. She dropped the ruler. Then she placed both hands on the door wheel. Open it, Soren said. Give me 1 minute. You have used 30 seconds. Then stop wasting the rest. The assassin fired. The weapon had no power signature. It was a mechanical dart launcher hidden from the palace network. The dart crossed the corridor. Mara turned the wheel. The door moved 6 centimeters. The dart struck the narrowing gap and shattered against the seal. Mara had not dodged. She had changed the angle. The assassin pulled back. A second arm entered the gap. Mara released the wheel, stepped forward, and pressed her injured arm against the opening. The door stopped. What? Queen Asha asked through the intercom. Mara's face appeared on the camera. She was pale now. Her breathing had lost its steady rhythm. Because if I close it completely, they'll cut through the upper hinge. If I leave it open this far, they can't bring a rifle through. You are holding the door open. I'm holding the only part they can't predict. The Queen looked at me. Can the crown identify them? I checked the sensory feed. The 12 signatures were not 12 assassins. There were 3 people and 9 remote decoys. The decoys had been placed inside the corridor to trigger the palace's automatic response. The real attackers were using the crowd of false signatures to hide their movement. I found the 3 living bodies. 1 stood at the door. 2 had already passed into the old service cavity. They were not heading toward the throne room. They were heading toward the nursery. Mara, I said, there are 2 more inside the wall. She turned toward the maintenance shaft. The assassins had expected the palace to use the purge. They had not expected the human to find the old cavity first. Mara made her choice. She did not activate the braces. She pulled the emergency construction alarm. A red light began to rotate above the corridor. The old palace speakers came alive. Structural failure, Mara announced. All personnel remained still. The message repeated in 6 languages. The two assassins inside the wall stopped. They had entered the shaft because they believed it was unmonitored. Mara had just made it the most visible place in the palace. She opened the maintenance panel wider and called out, "You have two exits. The first leads into the nursery. The second leads into the pressure lock. Choose the pressure lock and surrender your weapons." No one answered. The attacker at the door fired again. Mara twisted the wheel. The seal moved. The dart struck the ceiling. She was losing strength. Her injured arm had begun to shake. I accessed the palace announcement system. "Unknown personnel in the eastern corridor," I said. "Your weapons are identified as mechanical and your decoys have been isolated. Surrender now and medical care will be provided." Soren looked at me as if I had committed treason. "You are offering terms. I'm reducing the number of bodies we need to identify." The first assassin dropped his weapon. The other two followed after 6 seconds. Mara kept the door in place until the palace guards reached the pressure lock. Then she turned the wheel from the inside. The seal closed. The nursery wing remained untouched. The queen's crown brightened, reading the corridor through the walls. 3 attackers, I said. 9 decoys. No child injured. Queen Asha entered the corridor herself. Soren moved to stop her, but she raised one hand. The crown's plates opened like pale leaves. "The palace failed," she said. Soren bowed his head. "The weapons were compromised." "The palace failed," she repeated, and a civilian repaired its meaning with one door. Mara leaned against the seal. "I didn't repair anything." "What did you do?" I stopped the dangerous answer from being the easiest one. No one spoke. The attackers were removed alive. Their decoy network was traced to a faction inside the palace logistics office. The weapon failure had not been an invasion from outside. It had been an attempt to make the palace kill its own nursery staff during the confusion. The old manual seal had prevented that. Mara had understood it before the palace did. 3 weeks later, Queen Asha summoned the Security Council. Commander Terrell Soren argued that the palace needed stronger weapons, faster purge systems, and authority to eliminate any intruder before a second door could close. Mara sat at the end of the table with her injured arm still in a brace. She said nothing until the queen asked for her recommendation. Mara unfolded the old paper map. "Measure every security system by one question," she said. "How many lives does it keep safe when the system fails?" Soren objected. "That is not a military measurement." "No, Marari Plaiv. It's a protection measurement." Queen Asha changed the palace law that day. Security would no longer be ranked by weapons deployed, attackers eliminated, or response time alone. Every defensive system had to record the lives it preserved during failure. The law became known as the Vale Standard. Mara refused to have her name attached to it. She asked that the first line read differently. "A secure palace is not the place with the most weapons. It is the place where the children remain alive when all the weapons go dark." Asterisk asterisk, the old nursery ring 7 door was never replaced. Its manual wheel still carried the mark of Mara's blood beneath the paint. Visitors asked why the palace kept a damaged door in its central gallery. Queen Asha always gave the same answer. "Because once, the only thing standing between my family and death was a human who refused to make killing the simplest choice." A door is not a wall. It is a decision about who gets to live on the other side. If this story made you think about what protection really means, tell us what the first rule of a secure palace should be. And subscribe to Kaelvorn for another record from the Galactic Archive.